Hi, my name's Conor Gormley. I'm a reporter for the Chichester Observer, and I don't know if you can see behind me, but that there is Kim's Bookshop. It's a city centre favourite. It's been in the town for coming on 20 years now, and unfortunately, as of next month, I think around the 22nd, it is set to close. It's a real tragedy for the city centre, and I know there are hordes of very loyal customers totally devastated by the news. The sole silver lining in what is ultimately a really quite sad outcome for the city, in my opinion, is the fact that there's a 25% sale on, and Kim's Bookshop has been one of my favourites, I think probably since I was a teenager, up there with Haygates in Bognor Regis, and also the other Kim's in Arundel, which is fortunately still staying open. So I think what we're going to do today is pop inside, have a little look around, and see if we can make the most of that 25% off. So happy to have you guys with me, really. So I've settled myself down in the top floor of the bookshop, the third floor, where they keep all the fiction. My hair has seemed to have gone a bit nuts in the heat, although it's generally a bit nuts. And I found a nice, healthy stack of books, some of which I've read already, and some of which I really like the look of, having just sort of wandered around here. And you can see I can barely concentrate on the camera because there's so much. And so much to sort of tuck into, but this is the stuff that's jumped out of me, just that would be interesting to talk about, that I like, and some of which that I'd like to read, some of which I might buy. And the first on my list here is Atonement by Ian McEwan. I remember I read this when I was 17, so when I was doing my A-levels. It was our coursework book. If you don't know what it's about a family that's split up, basically a couple that's split up by the Second World War. It's quite a complicated story in some ways, because the man winds up sort of unfairly persecuted due to a misunderstanding with his sort of girlfriend's, his erstwhile girlfriend's sister. It all winds up being really quite tragic, and I don't want to say too much more about it, in case I spoil it. But it's a very famous book, and there's a fantastic film starring, what's her name? Keira Knightley in it. That's very well worth watching. But the book is even better. Gorgeous prose. Ian McEwan is potentially one of the best prose writers of the last generation, of the last 20 years, I think. Although he's been going for longer than that. But and not just that, for me it was the book that really awakened in me a sense of sort of profound empathy, made me realise that other people have internal lives as complex and as ruined and as broken and dysfunctional as my own, if that makes any sort of sense. It's a really powerfully kind book, I thought. The next two, bit of a two-in-one here. Titus Groan and Gormenghast by Mervyn Peake. Beautiful books, astounding prose, a real sort of, a kind of like if you've read any Dickens, but with a sort of an even greater, more emphasised sense of etched detail, as though he's sort of, Mervyn Peake was a writer as well, and a painter as well as a writer, and you can see him drawing and carving each line of each character with every word. It's wonderful stuff. The prose, the plot is very thin. It's much more about the characters. There's the sort of, what was his name? I think it was is it Steerpike, the family butler in this book. Very sort of tall and leaning and gangly. His knees click with every step. It's wonderful. His rivalry with this chef Swalter, who's this, as you might understand, this sort of bulging, kind of horrendously distended chef. So it's much more about the characters, but the broad plot follows Titus Groan, who is the heir to Gormenghast, is this landed estate in the middle of nowhere, apparently very inspired by Arundel Castle, and his attempts to escape, his attempts to reconcile himself to the sort of oldie worldy, very kind of ancient traditions of his family, and another character's attempts to, I can't remember if that was Steerpike, another character's attempts to rise through the ranks of the castle society through skullduggery, I suppose you'd say. I'm not doing it justice, and it's been a very long time since I've read them, but I do have a very distinct memory of how beautiful these were and how much I really enjoyed spending time in their worlds. Beyond that, Lincoln and the Bardo, I've read much more recently, and I don't cry very much, not because I'm sort of macho. I'm on antidepressants, which tends to sort of mute things a bit, but this book absolutely made me cry. It's by George Saunders, and it's very, very keenly felt. It's about the death of Abraham Lincoln's son, the death of Abraham Lincoln's son, and he when he dies, he finds himself in the Bardo, which is effectively this kind of purgatory, and he shares this space with a few other ghosts from prior to his death and a few hundred years beforehand, all of whom realise that he really should be somewhere else and do their best to send him on to the next life, while Abraham Lincoln himself visits his son's grave basically every night to weep over it. It's incredibly moving and very, very funny. It sort of reads almost more like a script for a play in the way that it's laid out, which takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you're there, it flows very, very nicely and really beautifully.